treasury has about 500 storybooks harvested in the first editions of the National Competition on Storybook Writing. To showcase these treasures, the Regional Redex Project was organized in 2019, in which regions showcased their own harvest. A much bigger showcase is planned for 2020 when the National Redex is scheduled. To answer the call for showcasing the reading treasury while staying at home due to the health crisis, we are now introducing the Redex Online. This exhibit will expand the treasury from having a harvest of storybooks into a bigger harvest of derivative works, which include storytelling videos, audiobook narration, and novel approaches like multimedia. Join us in this activity, and together we will harvest the best inspiring and worthy stories for the Filipino children.
Ang kaban ng mga kwento ng bayan ko ay mula sa atin ng Bureau of Learning Resources at ng mga Learning Resources Management Section ng Kagawaran ng Edukasyon. Manood, makinig, at matuto.
Mahalaga, susi sa kinabukasan, mga taong inaasahan, gawain ay gampanan. Pagkatuto ng mag-aaral, misyon ng gurong huwaran, tulong malilinang sa text at non-text LRs na tangan. Kalidad ng LRs, pagtuunan ng pansin, prosesong pagdaanan, huwag baliwalain. Paglaan ng LR sa tamang oras ay gawin. Saya ng guro't mag-aral, siguradong bibitin. Anumang nangarin ay kayang makamtan. Tulong-tulong, sama-sama tayo sa pagsagwan. Gawain may puso, di mahirap gampanan. Tayo na at makisa. Magmalasakit sa bayan. Tayo na sa edukasyon, manindigan at tumayo, daluyong ng galaw tungo sa pagbabago. Sulong BNR, gawain ay pagyamanin, tagumpay at ngitiin, sama-samang abutin. Mantin naman tayo'y palakasin ng may kapal, malasakit sa ilar, bunga ng pagmamahal. Gawin ng tama para sa bayan, para sa bata, kapit-bisig, lahat pahalagahan. Ang pagpapala, anumang nangarin ay kayang makamtan. Tulong-tulong, sama-sama tayo sa pagsagwan. Gawain may puso, di mahirap gampanan. Tayo na at makisa. Magmalasakit sa bayan.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is the first leg of the webinar series on copyright awareness, spearheaded by the Bureau of Learning Resources and the DepEd Legal Service. Before we start, we will have a few reminders to make this webinar a smooth success. First, this webinar is recorded by the organizers. However, we will not allow recording in any manner aside from taking down notes on your notebooks and devices. We will also caution participants to annotate on the screen. Second, participants' video and audio are automatically in mute mode. All questions and comments may be raised via our chat box. Our moderators will be picking up questions for the open forum. As there are many questions collected through our survey prior to this webinar, we will take these first, and should there be enough time, we will entertain questions raised through our chat box and other platforms. Third, please ensure that you have a stable internet connection to catch all the presentations and the discussions. We will ask for the transcript of the presentations. However, this might not be applicable to all speakers. We advise that everyone listens attentively and participates if there's a need. Fourth, after the session tomorrow, we ask that you take the online evaluation to be eligible for a certificate. Remember, this is a 2-day activity, and we will be monitoring the attendance and requests.
Today is the 25th of June 2020. We are on Microsoft Teams for the webinar on copyright for the Department of Education personnel. We ask to feel the spirit of nationalism and the presence of the Almighty. In your own homes, in your own homes, please join us in reciting the DepEd mission, vision, and core values. DepEd vision. We dream of Filipinos who passionately love their country and whose values and competencies enable them to realize their full potential and contribute meaningfully to building the nation. As a learner-centered public institution, the Department of Education continuously improves itself to better serve its stakeholders. DepEd mission: to protect and promote the right of every Filipino to quality, equitable, culture-based, and complete basic education where students learn in a child-friendly, gender-sensitive, safe, and motivating environment. Teachers facilitate learning and constantly nurture every learner. Administrators and staff, as stewards of the institution, ensure a environment that effective learning happens. Family, community, and other stakeholders are engaged and share responsibility for developing lifelong learners. Our core values: makadiyos, makatao, makakalikasan, makabansa.
Good afternoon once again. May we go back to the reminders. Before we start, we still have these reminders for the webinar. First, the webinar is recorded by the organizers. However, we will not allow recording in any manner aside from taking down notes on your notebooks and devices. We will also caution participants to annotate on the screen. Second, participants' video and audio are automatically in mute mode, and all questions and comments may be raised via our chat box. Our moderators will be picking up questions for the open forum, and as there are many questions collected through our survey prior to the webinar, we will take these first. Should there be enough time, we will entertain questions raised through our chat box and other platforms. Third, please ensure that you have a stable internet connection to catch all the presentations and the discussions. We will ask for the transcript of the presentations, however, this might not be applicable to all speakers. We advise that everyone listens attentively and participates if there's a need. Fourth, after the session, we ask that you take the online evaluation to be eligible for a certificate. That will be for tomorrow. Remember that this is a 2-day activity, and we will be monitoring the attendance by generating such from the platform system. So good afternoon once again. We are joined today by the participants from Ilocos Region, Cagayan Valley, Cordillera Administrative Region, Central Luzon, National Capital Region, Calabarzon, Mimaropa, Bicol Region, Western Visayas, Central Visayas, Eastern Visayas, Zamboanga Peninsula, Northern Mindanao, Caraga, Davao Region, Soscargen, and the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region in Muslim Mindanao. Our participants are learning resource supervisors, project development officers, librarians, LR designates, ADM coordinators, education program supervisors, ADM writers, evaluators, and illustrators, regional and division lawyers, legal staff, and other personnel within the Department of Education. Also in the webinar are supervisors, specialists, and technical staff from the Bureau of Learning Resources, the Bureau of Curriculum Development, the Bureau of Learning Delivery, the Bureau of Education Assessment, the Alternative Learning System Task Force, the Information and Communication Technology Service, and the Legal Service. Also, in this live event are our speakers from the Intellectual Property Office of the Philippines.
We are honored to have graced this afternoon's activity with the presence of Undersecretary for Curriculum and Instruction, Justado M. San Antonio, Undersecretary for Legal Affairs, Josephine Maribohok, Assistant Secretary for Curriculum and Instruction and BLR Officer in Charge, Alma Ruby Torrio, Assistant Secretary for Legal Affairs, Alberto Escobarte, Assistant Secretary for Procurement, Salvador Malana, and participants from the Office of the Secretary. We also acknowledge the presence of our BLR Director, Raul Larosa, ICTS Director Abram Banil, and Legal Service Director Rohan Orebia. Also in the webinar are LR Production Chief Bessie Agamata, LR Quality Assurance Chief Daisy Asuncion Santos, and Legal Division OIC Chief Attorney Arturo Shoson. To welcome us to this portal of learning, we give you Assistant Secretary for Curriculum and Instruction and Officer in Charge of the Bureau of Learning Resources, Alma Ruby Torrio.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the webinar on copyright for our DepEd personnel. We're very happy to be able to organize this webinar. My dear participants, you have been chosen to be part of this webinar because of your involvement in the production and development of locally produced teaching and learning materials. Through this webinar, you will be able to increase your knowledge concerning copyright in the department. The webinar will be for 2 days, and we have engaged partners from IPOFIL and our own authorities and specialists in the department to give informative talks on the overview of our learning resources and issues concerning copyright. I am sure over the next 2 days, all the participants will pick up valuable insights from our resource speakers. It goes without saying that great efforts went in preparing for this webinar. So on behalf of the training team, I would like to offer my thanks to our resource speakers for sharing their knowledge and expertise. And on behalf of the Curriculum Instruction Strand, headed by Undersecretary Diosdado San Antonio, I would like to take this opportunity to thank the Office of the Legal Affairs, headed by Undersecretary Josephine Marie Bohok, for this partnership in capacitating our colleagues. I would like to give a special recognition to Dr. Bessie Agamata, the Chief Program Specialist, Learning Resources Production Division of the Bureau of Learning Resources, to Director Attorney Roan Orebia, Director 4 for Legal Affairs, and to their respective team for their hard work in hosting this webinar. And again, to all our participants, we are grateful for making yourselves available. A very warm welcome to all of you. Maraming salamat po.
Thank you so much, ASEC Alma Ruby Itorio. And as the ASEC Alma is now our officer in charge of the Bureau of Learning Resources, and at the same time, the Assistant Secretary for Curriculum and Instruction. We are claiming that this afternoon will be fruitful enough because the activity is in partnership with the experts in the field. Or, to put on more weight, they are not just experts, they are the authority in the topics. To give us an overview of the topics and the speakers and the statement of purpose, here is the Legal Service Director, Rowan Orepia.
Hello, good afternoon. The school is legally recognized as the heart of the formal education system, as it is where children learn. It has been our focus such that all the other governance levels, schools division office, regional office, and central office provide support. It is inherently embedded in us to prioritize the needs of the school that includes learning resources or LRs. LRs come in various forms, and they are also developed and produced in many ways. While there are centrally procured and managed LRs pursuant to the Book Publishing Industry Development Law, RA 8047, classroom teachers and education implementers in the field offices also develop local learning resources contextualized to their language and the needs of the locality. The importance and development of LRs have been emphasized more during the Infinity Plan, among others. It is in this context that this webinar has been urgently organized to the developers to appreciate the interplay between development of LRs and
So we are getting reports that the number of attendees is now 3,020. We are actually aiming for 790 or less than 800, but we are now getting a lot more than that, so it's 3,000 attendees. as of the moment. So the webinar is just the first in a series putting prime on the development of modules for the alternative delivery mode or ADM and other programs that address the different modalities in the current setup. And the current setup meaning it's the pandemic. So to continue, Sir George.
Before we proceed, before proceeding to the main topics of this afternoon, we are giving you not one, but two undersecretaries. Here are Undersecretary for Curriculum and Instruction, Diosdado San Antonio, and Undersecretary for Legal Affairs, Josephine Maribojo.
We had to start from scratch. Fast forward to 2019, now we have around 500 storybooks in our treasury. All of them were written by teachers who are the source of inspiration of Filipino children and the program planners in DepEd and of the whole community. This competition complements and supplements classroom learning, not only in languages, but also in many other learning areas. Continue and always be inspired para sa bata, para sa bayan. For a winner never stops trying.
Treasury has about 500 storybooks harvested in the first editions of the National Competition on Storybook Writing. To showcase these treasures, the Regional Redex Project was organized in 2019, in which regions showcased their own harvest. A much bigger showcase is planned for 2020 when the National Redex is scheduled. To answer the call for showcasing the reading treasury while staying at home due to the health crisis, we are now introducing the Redex Online. This exhibit will expand the treasury from having a harvest of storybooks into a bigger harvest of the Riveted Works, which include storytelling videos, audiobook narration, and novel approaches like multimedia. Join us in this activity, and together, we will harvest the best inspiring and worthy stories for the Filipino children.
Ang kaban ng mga kwento ng bayan ko ay mula sa amin ng Bureau of Learning Resources at ng mga Learning Resources Management Section ng Kagawaran ng Edukasyon. Manood, makinig, at matuto.
Kasi mahalaga, susi sa kinabukasan, mga tao inaasahan, gawain ay gampanan. Pagkatuto ng mag-aaral, misyon ng gurong waran, tulong malilinang sa text at ng textilars na tangan. Kalidad ng LRs, pagtuunan ng pansin, prosesong pagdaanan, huwag baliwalain. Paglaan ng LR sa tamang oras ay gawin. Saya ng guro't mag-aral, siguradong bibitin. Anumang nangaring ay kayang makamtan. Tulong-tulong, sama-sama tayo sa pagsagwan. Gawain may puso, di mahirap gampanan. Tayo na at makisa. Magmalasakit sa bayan. Tayo na sa edukasyon, manindigan at humayo, daluyong ng galaw, tungo sa pagkahaba. Sulumbin at gawain ay pagyamanin, upay at itiin, sama-samang abutin. Mantina man tayo'y palakasin ng may kapal, malasakit sa ilar, bunga ng pagmamahal. Gawin ng tama para sa bayan, para sa bata, kapit-bisig, lahat pahalagahan. Ang pagpapala, anumang nangarin ay kayang makamtan. Tulong-tulong, sama-sama tayo sa pagsagwan. Gawain may puso, di mahirap gampanan. Tayo na at makiisa. Magmalasakit sa bayan. Magmalasakit sa bayan.
Just like what we have mentioned a while back, we have with us two undersecretaries this afternoon, and they are live. And it's because they are live, we are also trying to connect all the dots here. Yusik Dads will be giving his special message next. So before proceeding to the main topics this afternoon, we are giving you the Undersecretary for Curriculum and Instruction, Yusek Diosdado San Antonio. Oh, all right. Yes, again, this happens a lot when we do a live broadcast. Um, Yusek Dads is just reading his special message to us, of course. And we can see here now that we have 3,216 attendees as of the moment. So padagdag ng padagdag. As we have said, we originally intended for 790 participants, composed of the LR supervisors and selected ADM writers, illustrators, and evaluators. But now, it seems that copyright is really a topic that interests everyone, especially those who are developing learning resources in response to the current pandemic and in response to the learning continuity plan of the Department of Education. As of now, we have ADM and alternative learning system, the ALS, and other special programs like the homeroom guidance. The writers are also here, and special programs, the writers and the illustrators, as well as the evaluators, are also here. The learning resource evaluators of the regional offices and the division offices are also here with us, and some interested writers, illustrators, and evaluators of locally developed learning resources. At this juncture, while USEC San Antonio is preparing his special message, we will be hearing another special message from another undersecretary. This time, as we have mentioned earlier, that we are joined with two undersecretaries, two equal hardworking undersecretaries. This time, let us welcome the Undersecretary for Legal Affairs, Attorney Josephine Maribohok.
Magandang hapon po sa ating lahat. John, can I be heard?
Yes po, Yusek.
Okay, hi, good afternoon. I hope we are all in good health and spirits despite the challenges we are facing in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic. As we all know and embrace, learning must continue. In the words of our dear Secretary Liling, in this rather extraordinary situation in which our basic education is now immersed. Thus, we are conducting this webinar on copyright for DepEd personnel from our various offices in the different governance levels to facilitate the production, reproduction, adaptation, and use of learning resources to support the basic education learning continuity plan in the time of COVID-19, as well as to address the need for learning resources in basic education under normal times within the bounds of law. So first of all, I thank our curriculum and instruction strand headed by our Undersecretary Diosdado San Antonio, as well as our Assistant Secretary Alma Torrio, for making this webinar possible through our
partnership with the legal affairs. I also thank the Intellectual Property Office of the Philippines through the Bureau of Copyright and Related Rights under the leadership of Director Emerson Cuyo for sharing their expertise to the DepEd this afternoon and tomorrow afternoon. Now, the cloud of uncertainty now enveloping us does not and cannot simply dissipate the dream of the Filipino people, including our learners. This dream is articulated in the Ambition Natin 2040, which states, I quote, by 2040, the Philippines shall be a prosperous, predominantly middle-class society where no one is poor. Our people shall live long and healthy lives, be smart and innovative, and shall live in a high-trust society. This vision is captured in the Philippine Development Plan of 2017 to 2022, which sets the goal of having a high level of human development by 2022 through lifelong learning opportunities made available to all. This is a constitutional duty of the state to protect and promote the right of all citizens to quality education at all levels and to take appropriate steps to make such education available to all. Now, we in DepEd are tasked to perform this constitutional duty. It is our task to reach and teach every child in the country. As prescribed in RA 9155 or the Governance of Basic Education Act of 2001, DepEd is vested with authority, accountability, and responsibility for ensuring access to, promoting equity in, and improving the quality of basic education as pursued in our Sulong Edukalidad. Whether as workers in DepEd or perhaps as students once upon a time, we are all aware of how important learning resources are to basic education. These learning resources are fruits of creativity. They are products of the mind of one or more persons. They are, in other words, intellectual properties. In promoting and protecting the right to accessible quality education, the 1987 Constitution and the Intellectual Property Code of the Philippines prescribe the state to embrace, I'd like to emphasize this, to embrace a human and social development trust on the use of intellectual property. So let me just quote very briefly the 1987 Constitution. It provides in Article 12, Section 6, the use of property, and that includes intellectual property, bears a social function, and all economic agents shall contribute to the common good. So again, the use of property bears a social function, and all economic agents shall contribute to the common good. Now, aligned with this provision of the 1987 Constitution, the Declaration of State Policy in the Intellectual Property Code of the Philippines reads, and this is very important, this is Section 2 of the Intellectual Property Code of the Philippines. Paragraph 1 states, the state shall protect and secure the exclusive rights of scientists, inventors, artists, and other gifted citizens to their intellectual property and creations, particularly when beneficial to the people for such periods as provided in this Act. So this first paragraph provides for protection of exclusive rights. But this declaration of state policy does not end with this first paragraph. There is a second paragraph which states the use of intellectual property bears a social function. So it borrows the words of the 1987 Constitution. It further reads, to this end, the state shall promote the diffusion of knowledge and information for the promotion of national development and progress and the common good. So again, there are two paragraphs in the Declaration of State Policy in the Intellectual Property Code. The first paragraph is about the protection of the exclusive rights of creators, but there is a second paragraph that emphasizes the promotion of the diffusion of knowledge and information for the promotion of national development and progress for the common good. So clearly, the Declaration of State Policy in the Intellectual Property Code manifests the recognition of the need to balance. The key word is balance. The two primary interests at play in the intellectual property system: the promotion of creative activity and exclusive rights, such as copyright, under the first paragraph on the one hand, and on the other hand, the social function of intellectual property anchored on the right of all people to human dignity, human development, and the promotion of the common good under the second paragraph of the Declaration of State Policy. So, to this end, there are certain exceptions to copyright as will be expounded upon during the webinar. But this early, for instance, let me just very briefly cite an exception to copyright: the Marrakesh Treaty to facilitate access to published works for persons who are blind, visually impaired, or otherwise print disabled, which allows, no, this treaty allows the use and conversion of copyrighted materials to accessible formats like Braille without permission from, again, without permission from, and payment of royalties to copyright holders under certain conditions. This will also be expounded upon during the webinar. The DepEd strongly supported the accession of the Philippines to this treaty, and it took effect in the Philippines in March 2019. So this is a treaty whose benefits we can already reap, no, for the production of learning resources for our learners who are blind, visually impaired, or otherwise print disabled. Thus, a sound and relevant intellectual property framework that would lead to national and human development should stimulate innovation and creativity of writers, authors, inventors, and creators in general, and protect ownership of such property, but while also allowing equitable access to intellectual property highly necessary in a developing country like the Philippines. So again, I emphasize there is a need to balance the exclusivity of rights of intellectual property creators and rights holders on the one hand, and the right of the general public to information and of learners and stakeholders in basic education to access intellectual property in order to foster knowledge and ultimately development. So inclusive growth, which lies at the heart of the Philippine Development Plan, can be facilitated by intellectual property not only through promotion and protection of creativity and products of creators, but also through information, education, and empowerment of a knowledgeable people. In other words, through human development. The necessity and significant contribution of intellectual property to the education sector, particularly in relation to DepEd's delivery of basic education services, cannot be overemphasized. For this reason, knowledge and copyright for the proper creation, reproduction, derivation, and use of intellectual property is necessary as we implement the K-12 program and use learning resources in print and multimedia format in various platforms, in different mother tongues and adaptations, and in accessible formats for learners with disabilities, such as Braille, among others. Under the K-12 program, our learners are encouraged to develop critical and creative thinking as part of their 21st century skills. And so in the process, they also produce intellectual property. Our teachers and personnel themselves produce intellectual property as they engage in the practice of their profession. These endeavors and activities involve matters of copyright. And so this webinar is really very important to take up these matters on copyright. Now, let me end by saying that every child deserves an opportunity for lifelong learning. Inasmuch as Henry Adams said that a teacher affects eternity, for he can never tell where his influence stops, we cannot tell also where the wonders of learning by using and creating intellectual properties may lead. One child, one teacher, one book, one pen can change the world, in the words of Malala. And that is true whether we are under normal times or under this extraordinary time of the COVID-19 pandemic. So let me end there, and I hope we will have a productive 2 days of this webinar on copyright. Again, good afternoon at maraming salamat po.
Ladies and gentlemen, that's the hardworking and the gorgeous Undersecretary for Legal Affairs, or maybe let's interchange the gorgeous and hardworking Undersecretary for Legal Affairs for the very, really substantive and inspirational message. Thank you so much, Yusek Josephine Mariboho. So friends, we are now climbing, we are now 3,318 or 3,336 attendees as of the moment. Maybe we can just generate some data, real-time data on what to expect this afternoon, since we have with us our speakers from the Intellectual Property Office of the Philippines. As what we have said earlier, they are not just the experts, they are the authority. Let me just generate data through menti.com. So everyone, we are requesting to go to menti.com using your laptops, using your tablets, using your phones, or any device that you are using right now. Once again, that's menti.com. So I guess some of us are now in menti.com. Can anyone confirm if you can see the message, Sir George? So everyone, once again, we are requesting you to access menti.com using your browsers, in your mobile devices, in your laptops, and in any of the devices that you are using right now. So the code here is 655614. Once again, that's 655614. The question here is, have you undergone copyright training or seminar? All right, so right now we have 5 responses. So we are waiting for others to access the menti.com The code once again is 655614. So out of the 7, 8, 13 participants, so there the graph is dynamic. Maybe we can just wait until we reach 500. So most of the developers here did not yet undergo copyright training or seminar. All right. So that's 60 versus 170 as of the moment. All right, so there. Mukhang nakikita natin dito ang pulso ng mga participants this afternoon. This is actually a question from Attorney Bayaras of the Intellectual Property of the Philippines. This is the first question from his set of questions. So mukhang mahihirapan nga tayo dito, Attorney Jeremy. Ito po yung pulso ng ating participants out of 3,300 participants. Currently, we have lamang po ang not yet, wala pong copyright training or seminar ang ating mga participants. Considering also that some of the participants are lawyers. So maybe we are assuming that those who answered yes are lawyers, of course. There. So we have reached 1,000 of the participants joining the Menti survey question. So right now, we can say that more than half, or I don't know if that's the percentage, but that's most of the participants did not yet undergo copyright training and seminar.
So once again, ladies and gentlemen, let us welcome our Undersecretary for Curriculum and Instruction for his special message, Undersecretary Justado San Antonio.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, fellow educators, fellow teachers. Thank you very much to the team of USEC Joe, and my salute to our BLR team for organizing this very important webinar. It's really a very challenging time, and we need to expedite the production of our self-learning modules. And we should really be guided on a very critical component of the production of learning resources in terms of awareness of copyright laws. So I am happy that we have finally been able to do this, and I hope that during this training activity, we will be able to sort out things, raise our questions, ventilate our doubts, so that the experts from the team of the Office of USEC, Joe, and Director Rowan can provide us the necessary guidance. Mabuhay po kayo. Maraming salamat. Ay yung commitment ng mga field officials make me feel more at ease that together we will be able to deliver what is expected of us as a kagawaran ng edukasyon. Maraming salamat po at mabuhay tayong lahat.
So that was it for our Undersecretary for Curriculum and Instruction. The Bureau of Learning Resources has been working with the Learning Resource Management sections of the regional offices and schools division office in providing every learner an appropriate and quality assured learning resource. As the pandemic creates a new normal for the personnel of the Department of Education, there is also a need to involve them in developing adaptive learning resources. In order to do this, we should first be acquainted with the hows and the whats and all there is in designing, developing, and producing learning resources. Ladies and gentlemen, you lead the Learning Resource Production Division, Dr. Bessie Agamata.
Good afternoon, everyone. So please bear with us because of the technical problems, but I'm very much sure that you are happy to see us. Anyways, my presentation is focused on the development of text-based learning resources, the procurement of manuscripts through competitive bidding, and then at the same time, the situations and the factors that triggered other various development of learning resources. So we know all our mandates. And if, let's say, you know it by heart, maybe you can recite it silently. So, Mr. Joselito, the next slide, please. To provide public schools and learning centers with diverse, quality, accessible, cost-effective, and appropriate learning resources to have effective and efficient learning outcomes. All these years, I can vouch that the BLR, through the support of our DepEd field personnel, you are one with us, trying to come up with the much needed learning resources to be given to our beloved learners, should I say. So on the next slide, we all know actually what is a definition of learning resources. These actually are text-based materials, print or non-print, or non-text-based materials such as devices, tools, equipment, manipulative toys, aligned with a K-12 curriculum used as primary basis or as supplements to teaching and learning processes. But in my presentation, I'll focus on text-based. So I mentioned a while ago that we will be orienting you on how, what came into being. So by default, we are actually procuring manuscripts through competitive bidding. We are abiding, we are following RA 8047 and Volume 5 Manual of Procedures for the procurement of manuscripts for textbooks and teachers' manual. On the next slide, how do we usually do this? Okay. We actually issue a textbook call. Okay. So when you talked about a textbook call, this is actually an invitation to prospective bidders. It is actually an announcement of what grade level, what materials are we calling for the publishers to be able to develop or submit their bids. So if you're going to look at the next slide, you will notice that a sample of the advertisement actually identifies the grade levels and then at the same time the learning areas, what will be the language to be used in the development of manuscripts, whether it would be English or Filipino, and then the type of learning resources. So like I said, through competitive bidding, we are calling for the submission of manuscripts for evaluation, textbooks, and teachers' manual. On the next slide, the publishers actually have the exclusive rights of the textbooks and the teachers' manuals. However, DepEd secures copyright authorization from the publishers to print the materials. The quantity of materials and year of printing depend on the negotiation. So we are familiar actually on RA 10533. On the next slide, it talks about basic education, which is intended to meet basic learning needs, which provides the foundation on which subsequent learning can be based. It encompasses kindergarten, elementary, and secondary education, as well as alternative learning systems for out-of-school learners and those with special needs. To expound more, on the next slide, The Enhanced Basic Education or K-12 program makes the Philippine education system par with the international standard of the 12-year basic education, thereby contributing to a better educated society capable of pursuing productive employment, entrepreneurship, or higher education studies. As we all know, kinder to grade 3, the child's dominant language is used as the language of learning. Mother tongue is used in instruction and learning materials of other learning areas. If we can proceed to the next slide, it was shown a while ago that to be able to develop holistic Filipino with 21st century skills and for them to be competent and skills, these are actually targeted in the learning areas, there must be a strong curriculum support system. So when we talked about curriculum support system, we are trying to provide you with all the materials. Okay? Since the K-12 curriculum is new at that time and not much TX and TMs were readily available to fill the gap in the provision of learning resources, the department commissioned content experts from various academic institutions and tapped depth and field personnel in the development of learning materials and encouraged the creation of these from other government agencies. So under the K-12 program, we developed and produced learning materials. As you can see on the next slide, we produced actually activity sheets. The activity sheets are for kindergarten and grade 1 learners written in 19 mother tongue. Can you see me? So in other words, these are consumable learning resources with practice exercises for learners to work on and actually provided to the kindergarten learners and grade 1 pupils. On the next slide, in the K-12 program, we actually labeled our learning resources as learners materials or kagamitan na mag-aaral, while others are manuals and readers. For grades 1 to 5, rather 1 to 2, we have 5 subjects which are contextualized and written in mother tongues, while 6 subjects are actually written and contextualized in mother tongues because of the inclusion of the science subject. On the other hand, on the next slide, Teacher's Guide or Kagamitan sa Pagtuturo. Actually, it's a prototype K-12 teachers resource which public school teachers can avail of, especially in conducting and facilitating their teaching. We also considered developing under the K-12 program what you call the manuals. The next slide, these manuals are actually for TPL, Technology Vocational Livelihood Education, and then we also have what you call the readers. So these readers are actually a compilation of all the reading materials. They are compiled and then at the same time, it focuses on the specific topic. And these readings are actually collated per field area. Next also, on the other slide, Yusuf Maribuhok made mention about the Marrakesh Treaty, and this will be discussed further by our experts. So to address the inclusive education, my dear friends, we also would like to consider, and we thought about it, providing manuscripts for visually impaired learners. So we have braille materials, and these are actually distributed, and I think some of the divisions and some of the schools who requested, more or less, you were able to get hold of these materials. In addition to the braille learning resources, we also provide materials for alternative learning system, or the ALS. And I think everybody's familiar about the ALS. Okay, so one we considered is actually the basic literacy learning materials, or the BLLM. And these materials or modules are intended for learners who cannot read, write, and count. In addition to the BLLM, we also have the accreditation and equivalency modules. So these are learning materials for the elementary and secondary school dropouts. Print modules, digitized modules rather, and radio scripts. On the other hand, we also provide materials for our learners, such as the Alive materials, and these are actually Arabic language and Islamic values education. So you notice that we have an array and diverse developed learning resources. Further, we also have learning resources for the indigenous peoples education, or the IPED learning materials. DepEd, now it was made mention, and we're experiencing this. We were caught by surprise because of the COVID-19. All of a sudden, we are paralyzed on what we usually do, but nonetheless, life must go on. So the department actually thought of continuing the learning process. That's the reason why they came up with the Basic Education Learning Continuity Plan, or the BELCP, to enable the learners of the basic education to continue learning and for teachers to be able to deliver instruction in a safe work and learning environment amid the threat of COVID-19. The key elements of the learning strategies that shall operationalize the BELCP are the streamlining of the K-12 curriculum into the most essential learning competencies, or MELCs, and allowing of multiple learning delivery models. So when you have to have that vision to continue learning, there will be a lot of changes. There will be a lot of strategic thinking. What will be the methods to be able to pursue our vision? So learning strategies on the next slide and modalities are actually affected in the development and provision of learning resources. So you have the face-to-face. Distance learning under it would be the modular distance learning. And then the online distance learning, the TV radio-based instruction, blended learning, and homeschooling, which I made mention, really affected the development of provision of learning resources. In addition to all those I've mentioned, actually the Bureau of Learning Delivery initiated that there will be a lot of materials which will be coming in different forms. And then we consider that the self-learning modules will definitely be printed. And then at the same time, it will be converted into interactive format. And very important to be able to target inclusive education, we would like to have an interactive e-books where videos, audio, and even sign language interpretation are embedded. And there will also be converted of video tape lessons for radio scripts and radio-based instruction. On the next slide, the BLD actually, since they're working on the learning delivery, they really have to think side by side with BLR, what are the other materials to be provided to our learners. So they thought of having the self-learning modules for senior high school core learning areas developed under Primals Plus, Balikasaysayan lesson exemplars, and travelogues developed by regions. At the same time, multi-grade self-instructional tools for learners available in multi-grade schools, and the primer lessons in the 19 languages. The BLR and the Learning Resource Management section are actually have that strong foundation in relation to the development of learning resources. So we are happy to note on the next slide that there is actually a treasury. And you have been seeing this over and over as a space filler during the time that we're having the problem. But nonetheless, we are so proud of the work of our teachers and the leadership, of course, of our regional LR supervisors and the division LR supervisors and those teachers who really are one with us, with BLR, to come up with this reading treasury. Let me just emphasize, it is a collection of storybooks that address learning competencies in the K-12 curriculum. Like what I said, I salute by our classroom teachers nationwide and illustrated by DepEd personnel with beginning readers in mind. The storybooks are harvested through the national competition of storybook writing, and as of 2020, there are 492 storybooks in the reading treasury. So, the 133 storybooks are already accessible through the Learning Resources portal and other external partners like the Globe e-Library. The 359 storybooks are in different phases of packaging, quality assurance, revision and enhancement, and mechanical editing. Adaptability to current situations is one component in addressing the elements of Education 4.0. We are familiar with VUCA world, volatility, uncertainty, complexity, ambiguity, and now disruptiveness. Pandemic and other health crises that cause class disruptions call for adaptive programs that can address basic literacy and numeracy skills among beginning learners. The BLR, having established its turf in developing the storybooks and other activities in its reading treasury, launched the Reading Exhibit Online, or ReadX, a platform for teachers to showcase storytelling and multimedia presentation as ways of alternative and supplementary learning. So in addition to the development of all the storybooks, actually, the BLR never rests. Actually, we are thinking of ways on how are we be able to be of service. And we are so happy that it happened, or it is happening, because we have a strong support of our BLR staff and personnel. So we really congratulate them. Aside from the reading treasury, we also have what you call the senior high school video lecture project, right? And it was actually participated initially by the regions NCR and then region 3 and 4A. That's why on the next slides, you will be able to see some of the examples, all right, of the senior high school videos that they produced, all right. So on another slide, you will see the other examples. Let me just tell you, my dear friends, these videos actually were given to ICTS and on the process of what? Development, redevelopment, and improving actually the raw material. Okay. So the regional area supervisors, the division EPSs, and then the teachers with background in multimedia, and mass communication and the like, and even the senior high school teachers put together all their creative juices to come up with this senior high school video. Okay, so let me just emphasize that with all the litany of learning resources that we provided and we will be trying to provide to our learners, with or without the pandemic or in any situation, I just would like to tell you, it's not actually easy, especially on the development. If let's say, we just would like to develop something and you have that intention really, right? I am the development team. I'm given the tasks. And then I am working on a certain time frame. If let's say you have that thought and you started writing and copy pasting and not attributing the source and even citing the reference, I think that's not right. Submitting something which actually a violation of the intellectual rights of others, actually it's a no-no for all of us. This is actually the reason why we would like to have this webinar, so that the technical inputting will definitely be coming from the experts. And we are very fortunate. The technical inputting will only be successful if, let's say, it will be translated in the work that we have to be able to produce and improve the quality of our manuscripts, and at the same time, I believe it has something to do with attitude. So you have the technical expertise, but it should be compounded with the right attitude. So in closing, my dear friends, I'm happy to see all of you, though not physically. In due time, we will be able to see each other. So without that, let me just go back on that before I say my last words. All the learning resources will definitely be accessible. And we would like really only the quality learning resources will be uploaded to DepEd LR portal and at the same time in the Creative Commons. These two should not be separated. They have to work hand in hand. Because if we will not make use of them, definitely we'll be having problems. Anyway, without further ado, I would like to say my last words. Learning resource development is full of challenges, but if we are filled with fresh ideas and inspiration to face the day's toil, we will propel towards success. The success not lies with the BLR, not with any office, but from to all of us. All the best thing that we can do We have the technical inputting in the 2 days. Let's make use of them to be able to have effective and of quality learning resources. So sabi nga sa BLR, tuloy ang sagwan. Salamat po sa inyong lahat.
Tuloy ang sagwan. That's the very inspiring message of Ma'am Bessie Agamata, the Chief of Learning Resources Management Section. The internet is one global village where information are all connected. Some of the contents are free while others are not. The pandemic opens up more resources than any time before. In the department, we have got a long list of learning resource categories that teachers can use and ADM module developers can refer to. Thank you very much, Dr. Bessie C. Agamata, for giving us or digging deeper on this, digging deeper on the matrix of learning resources of DepEd. When we ask writers, illustrators, and evaluators of learning resources what are their stand on copyright, we sometimes hear the extremes. Some say nakakatakot, while others say we value creativity, so only make originals. Some would open up about the intricacy of fair use, and some would beat up their desk and sulk in the ideas of plagiarism and a copyright infringement. We have collected questions on copyright prior to this webinar. Actually, it was floated last week, and we have so far received an overwhelming number of queries. We have forwarded your questions to the DepEd Legal Service, to our resource speakers, also from BLR, and from the Intellectual Property Office of the Philippines as basis to some of the topics today. Also, we have Are you ready for this afternoon's topic on copyright, everyone? So a while back, we have surveyed through menti.com, and the result, of course, is majority of the participants for the webinar did not yet attend a single seminar or training on copyright. So that means that our next speaker will have to maybe adjust or maybe to consider the where the participants are coming from. But before turning you over to our moderator for the topics on copyright, let us continue with this survey because our speaker forwarded 5 questions to us in order for him to survey what is the status of our knowledge on copyright for the basis of the topics. So let me request everyone to once again go to menti.com using your laptops and any other devices. We have another question for the mentee with the code 655614, and around 687 already answered the survey. The question is, in a rating of 1 to 5, where 1 is the lowest and 5 is the highest, how would you rate your knowledge on copyright? So far we have received 1,250 responses for the question. In a rating of 1 to 5, where 1 is the lowest and 5 is the highest, how would you rate your knowledge on copyright? And rank one among the those who answered rated 3. So it's somewhere in the middle. So the list actually has 5. Is number rank 5 is 5. Okay, there you have it. So it would be safe for us to say that the participants, mostly 2,000 answered or 1,500 answered, that they are along the middle of the spectrum. So to our speaker, the first survey says that most of our participants did not yet undergo training or workshop on copyright. And on the second survey, most of our participants have 3 when they rate their awareness on copyright from 1 to 5. So once again, let us have another survey using menti.com. The code here is 970900. This is a question for researchers. For private study and research, is it okay to reproduce? The first is 10% of the entire book, 20% of the entire book, 50% of the entire book, 100% of the entire book, and the last option is not allowed. Once again, the code is 970900. Again, the code is 970900. That's 970900. The question is, for private study and research, is it okay to reproduce? The code is 970900. So for now, we are getting most of the responses. It says, but actually it's not allowed to reproduce. Let's hear it later if it is actually not allowed or a certain percentage may be considered in the studying and researching of resources. So mukhang karamihan sa ating mga participants are natatakot. Some say natatakot. More and more participants are answering not allowed. So if you are studying for private study and research, it is not allowed to reproduce. That's the answer of most of our participants. But some of our participants are answering it's allowed to reproduce 10%. That's the far second. And almost equal are 20%, 50%, and 100% of the entire book. So there. Okay, so maybe we can proceed to the next question. We still have 2 questions for we still have 2 questions before we turn you over to the moderator. I do hope that you can see on your screen the next question. All right, so the next question is, by using CTTO and no copyright infringement intended, will the user be absolved from copyright infringement? The code is 285783. That's 285783. So we'll wait until we reach at least 200 respondents for this survey. CTTO or credit to the user? CTTO means a credit to the user. This is ever present in social media and other platforms, of course, in online platforms, and we often see no copyright infringement. Are these okay? Are these phrases absolved from copyright infringement? Most of the answers are saying no, and some say yes, and some say it depends. All right, so these are the questions from our speaker from the Intellectual Property Office of the Philippines. This will be used as basis for the this will be used as basis for the topic on copyright and other related rights. So now we give you, I do hope that you are now ready for the topic on copyright and related right. This will be the main topic this afternoon. This will be the main topic for the first day of our webinar. We turn you over to our moderator, the OIC Chief of the Legal Division from the Legal Service of the Department of Education. Please welcome Attorney Arturo Sioson.
Welcome again to today's webinar on copyright. I am Attorney Art Rosso from the Legal Division of the DepEd Central Office, and I will serve as your moderator for this next session. Our next session will be on copyright and related rights. As part of our continuing partnership with the Intellectual Property Office of the Philippines, we are privileged today to have with us our resource person and our next presenter. Our resource person holds a Bachelor of Laws degree from the Lyceum of the Philippines University and a BA Philosophy degree from UP Diliman. Prior to his joining IPOPhil, he was the head of the Adjudication Division of the Commission on Audit, Corporate Government Sector Cluster 4. He is the current chief of the Accreditation and Standards Division of the Bureau of Copyright and Other Related Rights. Our dear officials, my dearest colleagues in the department, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our next speaker, Attorney Jeremy John Bayares.
All right. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me? Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Yes, we can hear you, Attorney Bayares, Attorney Jeremy.
Yep. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, USEC Maribohok and USEC San Antonio, as well as the directors and personnel and educators of the Department of Education. We thank you for inviting us to this webinar to promote awareness on copyright, especially in these times when everything is going digital and where social media is becoming the common mode of communication or communicating with each other. And we assure you that the Bureau of Copyright and Related Rights will always be available to help the Department of Education to accomplish its mandate of educating the people and giving access access to knowledge, sources of knowledge to our countrymen. And so today I was tasked to talk about basic copyright and related rights. And I would just like to share my screen. All right. Can you see it?
Not yet, Attorney Jeremy. We're still waiting for the screen to pop up.
All Mm-hmm. Desktop. Can you see it now?
Yes, Sir Jeremy, you can play the presentation. It's up now, sir. Go ahead.
All right. All right. So good afternoon again. Today, I was asked to talk about basic copyright and related rights. And I'd like to begin, just as Yusek Maribohok mentioned earlier, using a provision from the Constitution on which states that the state, which provides that the state shall protect and secure the exclusive rights of scientists, inventors, artists, and other gifted citizens to their intellectual property and creations, particularly when beneficial to the people, for such period as may be provided by law. So this is the policy of the state to protect and secure the exclusive rights of our gifted citizens to their intellectual property for the benefit of the people. And to promote, to accomplish this policy of the state, the IP Code was was enacted in 1997. Although we have had copyright laws as early as the Spanish period, uh, it was only in 2013 that the Bureau of Copyright was created under RA 10372, and it was only manned in 2018. The first personnel actually of this department, of this bureau, was Director Cuyo, who will be giving the talk tomorrow. And under this, so so what is the purpose of the copyright law? What is the purpose of the IP code, or at least the copyright section of the IP code? According to Professor Netanel, there are two purposes of a copyright law. One is to accord exclusive rights to authors, to give them an incentive to create and disseminate their works. And second, to limit those very rights to further public access and to make it possible for today's creators to build upon the works of their predecessors. So today, I will talk about the first part, that is, what are the exclusive rights given to authors? And tomorrow, my director will talk about the second part, which is which is the limitations, which refers to the limitations on copyright. We call this the balancing of rights. So talagang balanse, kasi today we will talk about the exclusive rights, and tomorrow my director will talk to you about the limitations on copyright. So what are we going to learn today? So by the end of this talk, we hope that you will be able to answer the following questions. What is copyright? What works are protected by copyright law? Who owns the copyright over a work? And do employees have copyright over the work? How long is the copyright protection of a work? And what is a derivative work? And what are related rights? So as we go through the lessons today, please keep these questions in mind. Hopefully, maybe tomorrow we can ask you a different set of questions to confirm if you really if you learned something from this presentation. But hopefully, yes, no, even without the questions. So we begin by asking, what is copyright? Okay, there is no set definition of what copyright is. Actually, if you read the Intellectual Property Code, there is no definition there of what copyright is. But we can use, for purposes of this presentation, these two definitions. The first is from the World Intellectual Property Organization, which states that copyright is the legal protection extended to the owner of the rights in an original work that he has created. And again, from Professor Netanel, who says that copyright is a set of exclusive rights that the law grants to authors of original expression. So from here, we can get the idea that copyright is actually statutory in character. So it is limited by law. So one's copyright is limited to what is granted to him by the law. So what is not granted to him by the law cannot be said to form part of his rights under copyright. Now, what is protected by the copyright law? I have included here two images, so it will be easier for you to understand and to remember that the law only protects expressions of ideas and not ideas themselves. So we can see from section 175, you can read it from the screen, that no protection shall extend under this law to any idea, even if they are expressed. So no matter how much you express an idea, if it's just an idea, the idea will never be protected, or at least currently will not be protected under the IP code. What is protected is the expression of that idea. So I hope you're clear with that. The usual example that's used to illustrate this idea expression dichotomy is the idea of a love story between a poor guy and a lady that they fall in love, and then they die at the end of the story. So this idea is not protected. But once this idea is reduced into writing, like into a novel or into a movie, then the movie is protected and the novel is protected. Also, another example is the idea of a mother and child. So everywhere we can see like paintings of a mother and child. We can also see like sculptures of a mother and child. But the idea of a mother and child is not protected. But the sculpture of a mother and child is copyright protected because it is an expression of the idea of the mother and child. I hope that is clear. That idea is not protected, and it is the expression of ideas that is protected under the copyright law. Now, what expressions? Of course, we have already excluded ideas. We now come to expressions, to the works themselves. What expressions are protected under copyright law? We have here literary or artistic works that are original. Of course, when we say literary, this refers to works that are in writing or in printing, and artistic meaning it requires a certain creative skill in the production of the work. The more difficult term, I think, to be understood here is the term original. What do we mean by original? In one of the Supreme Court cases, the Supreme Court defined originality as to mean that original is not copied. That the word original means that it is not copied. The expression, okay, the expression is not copied. The idea may be copied, but the expression is not copied. This is in real life, originality. You know that when you copy something, even if you're not aware if you're infringing or not, you are aware that you're copying something. All right, if it's an expression. So if you're copying a sculpture, then you are not being original. If you're copying a text, then you are not being original, right? So here the Supreme Court said that to be original means that you should not copy an expression of a work. Again, to reiterate, what needs to be original is the expression and not the idea. Under the law, we also have this. Okay, so we are now clear about this, no? That what is protected by copyright law are expressions that are literary or artistic and are original. Now here we have the categories of original works under section 172 of the IP code. I've highlighted some items that may be of interest to you as educators. We have books, pamphlets, articles, and other writings. So original works are categorized into these 15 categories under the uh, intellectual property code. If you register your works to with the intellectual property office, you will see that in the application form, your work needs to be at least in any of the categories provided by law. All right, you can take a picture of the screen. So we now move on to derivative works. Um, so far, we have uh, talked about original works, the categories of original works. But what about derivative works? What are they, and are they also protected by copyright? What are derivative works? Derivative works, according to section 173 of the IP code, are the dramatizations, translations, adaptations, and abridgments, arrangements, and other alterations of literary or artistic works. It also includes collections of literary, scholarly, or artistic works, which are the collection being original by reason of their selection or coordination or arrangement of their contents. So, for example, we have like Harry Potter, which is written in English. If you translate that in Tagalog, that is called um, a derivative work, or Harry Potter as a novel and then dramatized or translated into a film, then that is called a derivative work. So, what do derivative works have copyright? Yes, under the law, derivative works are protected as new works, provided, however, that such new work shall not affect the force of any subsisting right upon the original works employed or any part thereof uh, shall not affect the copyright of the original work. And these derivative works will not also work to extend the copyright protection given to the original work. On collections, of course, we have here, when we say collections, if you just collect mere data, that is not protected because the law, again, as we have said earlier, for something to be protected, it must display some, it requires some creative skill. So if you just creative skill or artistic, there must have an artistic character to the collection. And how do we know if a collection has a creative skill involved? We look into how the selections of the selection of the data included in the collection are gathered, or how are they arranged, or how are they coordinated. Otherwise, hindi po siya copyright protected. So here we go again. To the works that are not protected by copyright, this is under sections 175 to 176. Can we go to the idea of an idea, procedure, system, method? These are not protected by copyright. For example, method would be that the method of taking the percentage, of a certain number. That is a method that is not copyright protected. Okay. The news of the day and other miscellaneous facts. So news of the day refers to facts that happened during the day, but it does not refer to the way the news was delivered, because that is a form of expression already. So that may be protected by law. But news, for example, of having a typhoon, or that there was flooding today, uh, cannot be copyrighted. The fact that there was flood cannot be copyrighted. So one news agency can report it, and then uh, he or that news agency cannot prohibit another news agency to broadcast a news about that particular fact of flooding. Also, official texts of the government are not protected by copyright. they are considered, of course, works of the government. There are special rules on the works of the government. Of course, you cannot just exploit the works of the government. Sometimes we need to ask permission from the agency to use their work. We in the Bureau of Copyright and Related Rights have already submitted the implementing rules for this particular provision of the law, and hopefully it will be issued this year or third quarter of the year. Um, under the banner of unprotected works are speeches, lectures, or sermons that are delivered before administrative bodies and deliberative assemblies and in meetings of public character. So, hindi yun copyright protected. However, the author of the speeches or lectures, sermons, shall have the right, according to the law, to make a collection of his work. So, hindi pwedeng yung nakikinig will make a collection of the work of a particular official, kumbaga speeches niya in the Senate or in the Congress. No one can make a collection of those speeches unless authorized by that particular public official. However, if he delivers a speech, that particular speech is not copyright protected. Now, we now have an idea of what works are protected and what works are not protected. The next question to be answered is, when does copyright protection begin? Well, copyright protection begins from the moment of creation, as we say, as it is written in section 172.2 of the IP Code. Works are protected by the sole fact of their creation, irrespective of their mode or form of creation, as well as of their content, quality, and purpose. So si copyright walang pakialam sa kalidad or purpose ng isang work, no? As long as it is a literary or artistic expression and is also original, then the copyright law protects it. Okay, so we go to, so it's protected from the moment of creation. So definitely, who is protected there, who owns the copyright there? The general rule is the author or creator, the one who created the work, right? This is the general rule, and these are the special rules. And I think this will be of importance to many of you, or to your friends maybe. If there is an employer-employee relationship, okay, and the employee creates a work in the course of his employment, and the creation of the work is part of his regular duties, then the employer owns the copyright. Otherwise, it is the employee who owns the copyright. But generally, if there is an employer-employee relationship, it is the employer who owns the copyright. And if there is joint authorship, okay, if there is an absence of an agreement between the parties, there usually is the general rule is that they are governed by the rules on co-ownership. However, if in a joint work where you can separate the works of each of the authors and the authors can be identified, then each of the authors will be considered the original owner and the copyright holder of that particular work that they created. And if it's a commissioned work, who owns the copyright? If it's a commissioned work, the author still owns the copyright, but the work itself is owned by the person who commissioned the work. So here there is a dichotomy. Again, there is a distinction between copyright and the work. So when an author or creator parts with the work, it does not mean that he also parts with the copyright over the work. That is very much pronounced in this particular provision of the law, where where the law says that in a commissioned work, it is the author who owns the copyright over a commissioned work, and the work shall be owned by the person who commissioned the work. All right, we go to audiovisual work. Who owns the copyright in an audiovisual work? Usually it's the author of the scenario, the composer of the music, the film director, and the author of the work so adapted. Right? So medyo masalimuot yung ownership in audiovisual work. Madaming may-ari ng copyright over that particular work. One may have the copyright over the music, one may have copyright over the scenario, and the producer also has copyright over the particular work. Now we go to letters. Letters, of course, this is an old rule. It is the writer who owns the copyright over the letter, but the letter itself will be owned by the addressee. Again, there is here the distinction between the copyright over a work and the work itself. How about anonymous and pseudonymous works? Usually, the law provides that the publisher is deemed to be the representative of the authors in case they are not known. Now, you own the copyright. Okay, what if you own the copyright? What protection does the law give you? What are the privileges does the law give you? They are particularly, specifically two copyright protections. One is the economic right, and two is the moral right. Okay, economic rights there are actually 7 economic rights, and there are in the copyright law, in the IP code, 4 moral rights. We will discuss them shortly here. Okay, the economic rights of a copyright holder is enumerated here. The IP code states that these are exclusive rights. Okay, so a copyright holder has an exclusive right to carry out, authorize, or prevent the following acts. Okay, the first one is the right of reproduction. The second one is the derivative works. We have discussed this earlier. So even translations, even if you want to translate Harry Potter into Tagalog, you need to get the permission of the copyright holder, of the author of that particular work. Also under economic rights is this right of first public distribution of the original copy, all the rental of the original copy, public display of the original copy, public performance of the work, and other communication to the public of the work. So as you can see, this is very broad. No, it's an exclusive right, but it encompasses so many things that sometimes we're afraid to use a work because we don't know baka we're infringing any of these rights. So I'll give you an idea. So probably just an introduction for tomorrow's talk. That infringement refers to this, but plagiarism may not necessarily refer to any of this. All right, so that will be my director's talk tomorrow. The difference between infringement and plagiarism. We also have special economic right, but this right is limited to only 3 works that are copyrightable. One is painting, the other is sculpture, and the third one is manuscript of an original writing or a composition of music. According to this rule, after the first disposition of the original work, of the painting, of the sculpture, or of the manuscript, and it is subsequently sold, okay, it is subsequently sold, that original manuscript, painting, or sculpture, then the original copyright holder, the author of the painting, the sculpture, or the manuscript, shall have an inalienable right to participate in the gross proceeds of the sale, or lease to the extent of 5%. So, inalienable right ito ng mga painters, sculptors, and writers and composers. So, lagi silang may 5% doon sa subsequent sale ng kanilang original painting, sculpture, or manuscript. We shall also issue the implementing rules on this particular provision of the law, probably during the third or fourth quarter of this year. Now, what are moral rights? Those are the economic rights. Now, what are the moral rights of a copyright holder? There are basically two. They are the right of attribution, or sometimes you call it the right of paternity, and the other one is the right of integrity. Under the right of attribution, an author of a work has the right to demand that his work be attributed to him. Okay, and the right of integrity gives the author the right to prevent any alteration to his work, okay, or to object to any distortion or mutilation of his work, and to restrain the use of his name with respect to any work not of his own creation or in a distorted version of his work. All right, so those are the rights given to a copyright holder: economic and moral rights. And for painters, sculptors, and those who are the copyright holders of an original manuscript of a writing or a composition, they are also given the special economic right of getting a share of 5% in case of subsequent sale of their original work. Now, can these rights be transferred? Okay. Can the economic and moral rights be transferred according to Section 180? Yes, copyright can be transferred, especially the economic rights. And you can actually divide the assignment of the economic rights. Like you can you can assign the reproduction of a work to another person, and you can at the same time assign to another person the right to distribute your work, and you can assign to another the collection of your rental and all that. So copyright can be transferred. Now, is copyright transfer the same as license? No, because in licensing, the owner of the copyright remains the owner, but authorizes someone else to exercise all or some of his rights subject to possible limitations. So one example of this is what we call the collective management organizations, where the authors and copyright owners give or assign to collective management organizations the collection of their royalties and to distribute the same royalties to them. So the copyright is still with the copyright holders, the original the copyright holders, the author and creator, and you can use, for example, their work and pay them. So when you use the work, the copyright ownership is not transferred to you. Just given the license to use it, you just have to pay royalties for that. All right, we now come to this part of the term of copyright protection. We said earlier that copyright protection begins from the moment of creation. Now, how long is that protection given by law in regard to copyright law, to copyright? And we have these rules. For economic rights, it's the right of the author or the creator is from the moment of creation of the work up to his death, and then 50 years more after his death. In case of joint creation, the 50 years is counted from the last surviving author, right? So that's for economic rights. How about moral right? The right of attribution, according to Section 198 of the Intellectual Property Code, the right of attribution of the author is for eternity, like perpetuity here, as stated in Section 198. So that is the general rule. These are the other rules on protection of copyrighted works. We have works of applied art, 25 years, photographic works, 50 years from publication, and if unpublished from the date of making. Performances not incorporated in recordings, 50 years from the end of year when performance was recorded, or sound or image and sound recordings including performances therein, 50 years from the end of the year the recording took place, and for broadcasts, 20 years. You can take a picture of that. Can actually provide you a copy of this presentation. Now we come to the second part. That's the copyright proper. Okay? Now we come to the related rights. The related rights refer to the rights of performers, producers of sound recordings, and broadcasting organizations. As you can see, the performers, producers, and broadcasters do not create. They are not the authors of the work themselves, but they help in the promotion of the work. Of the work of the authors and creators. So, for example, a dancer, a singer, to in reference to a composition and to a musical composition, or producers of a sound recording. This refers to public music labels and all that, and then for the broadcasting organizations refers to the terrestrial broadcasting like television and radio. Each of these three have their rights. The performers have their economic and moral rights as well. Since producers of sound recordings and broadcasting organizations are not natural persons, they do not get like moral rights per se, but they also have economic rights. So I'll show it to you. The economic rights of performers, here they are. With regard to their performances, the performers have the right to authorize the broadcasting of their performance, and they also have the right to fix their performance in a tangible manner. Okay, to have a fixation of their work. And aside from that, they also have the right to reproduce their performances, the first public distribution, rental, and making available to the. So this is very much the same as the rights given to the creators and authors, but again, this is called the related right of a performer because the performer did not create the original work. Pina-perform lang niya. A performer also has a special economic right. So the same as in paintings and sculptures and manuscripts na 5%, may 5% din sila dito. But it's not from the gross sales of the work, but the 5% of the original compensation. Ito ang nakalagay dito sa Section 206 of the IP Code. Moral rights, again, the same, claim to be identified, so it's the right of attribution and the right to object to any distortion. The rights of producers of sound recordings, of course, have these three rights: the right to authorize the direct or indirect reproduction of their sound recordings, the first public distribution, the right of rental also. And then the rights of broadcasting organizations, the right to rebroadcast, the right of recording in any manner, including the making of films or the use of videotape of their broadcasts, and the use of such records for fresh transmissions or for fresh recording. So, palapit ng 4. Finally, we have this registration and recordation distinction. In IPOFIL, in the Bureau of Copyright and Related Rights, we distinguish between registration and recordation. And of course, we said that copyright is afforded a work from the moment of creation. Now, is it necessary to register a particular work so that it will be protected by copyright? Syempre hindi na, because we said copyright is afforded to a work from the moment of creation. But why is there registration? We register a work as evidentiary for evidentiary purposes, so that may ebidensya tayo, may certificate tayo na sa atin yung copyright ng particular work na yon. It's the same as like a titulo ng lupa, which my director usually uses as an example. You can own a land, a lot, but mas maganda if you have the title to the land, so that when you transact using it or enter into business using it, into a contract or whatever, then mas maniniwala sa'yo yung kausap mo. So it's a market requirement also. So when we say registration in the Bureau of Copyright, we mean that you submit a copy of your work with us, that is, deposit your work with us, and also submit the required documents. I don't know if you can see me. Actually, I can't see myself. So I'll just show this. Can you see it in the camera? There's a form. I was not able to scan this for sana, but we have a registration form. You can see it, which you file with us, and then a copy of your work be also filed with us, and that's what we call registration. However, sabi natin kanina, since rights, economic rights, can be transferred or can be assigned to another person, we can also record that particular transfer or assignment to the other person, and we call that recordation. There's no more need for the deposit of that particular work with us. You just need to give us proof of transfer or proof of assignment, and then we will record it in our official records, and that's what we call recordation. So registration requires deposit, recordation does not require the depositing of the work itself with us, but both refers to the putting into the official records of your ownership or of the transfer or assignment of your copyright. So that's it. Thank you very much. If you have questions that will not be probably answered because it's already 4 o'clock, you can email us at copyright@ipofil.gov.ph. So what I shared to you today are the first part, or is the first part of what the law, what the Constitution mentions in its policy, that is giving the exclusive rights to the authors and creators of literary and artistic works. Tomorrow, my director will talk to you about the limitations to these exclusive rights given to authors and creators. So thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much, Attorney Jeremy. Attorney Jeremy, we'd like to ask if maybe we can pop in a few questions because medyo marami na po tayong questions that have been popping in live. And we also have some questions that were recorded earlier. And we found some, actually, we found some very common questions some basic common questions that maybe you can shed light on. Is that okay, Attorney Jeremy?
All right. Okay.
For one of the common questions that we saw among our participants is that is there any and to shed some context, Attorney Jeremy, kasi most of our participants from DepEd are teachers who are asked to develop learning materials. So they have to develop content for learning materials. So what we saw, one of the common questions that we saw was that are there specific rules when it comes to getting copying content from the internet?
Mm-hmm. Well, the principles of copyright, do not change just because everything is now digitized. All right. So just as in the publication or in publishing industry, we have this rule of asking the author or asking the publisher or whoever is assigned by the author to have the copyright. So in the same way, in the digital format of in the digital format or in the internet, we cannot just take photos or music or video and then show it to somebody else and probably to communicate it to the public without asking the author of uh, permission to share that particular work. However, I would just like to, and this is very tricky, no? This is very tricky. If it's from the social media, then there may be an implied license if they are implied, okay? Implied. So in copyright, it's not, we do not favor like implied licenses, but if it's posted on social media, there may be an implied license to share it because it's the social media. But from the internet, the Google, if you just probably search for it, if there are blogs or whatever, if it's a blog, then maybe. But you have to also attribute. There must also be the right of attribution given to the author because, as we have mentioned earlier, the right of attribution is for given to the author in perpetuity. All right. So
Thank you very much for that answer, Attorney Jeremy. Another common question that we saw, of course, this is we have participants here from DepEd. So this mostly involves government work. So one of the questions we saw is that would there be any copyright implications when they copy content from DepEd owned or government developed materials? Is there such a thing as copyright implications when copying from government work?
all right. So we mentioned that government works are not, there's no copyright in government works, right? But for administrative purposes, I think that the law also provides for the implementation of this particular rule that there's no copyright in government works. That is to ask for permission, to request for permission from a particular government agency for the use of their work that they produced. There's no, so that's the general rule. Although there is no copyright over government works, okay, there's no copyright over government works, there is still a need to request, okay, to ask for permission from that particular government agency to use their work, because that government agency may actually exact, is that the correct term? May demand, for example, a fee for the use of the work that they did. Okay. So I hope I answered the question. Or
Thank you. Attorney Jeremy, related to that, we have a follow-up question related to government work. The question is from one of our participants is that if a video recording of a public school teacher teaching, sorry, if is a video recording of a public, also private school teacher teaching protected by copyright. Who owns the copyright? Is it the teacher, or is it the video recorder, or the school, or is it, for in DepEd's case, would it be the government?
all right. Again, we go back to the basic principle of the employer-employee relationship. But before that, before I answer that, I'd like to mention about the requirement of the law that each school must have an IP policy, an intellectual property policy. So, sana merong ganun. But if there is no IP policy in that particular school or in any school, then we go back to the basic principle under the IP code that if there is an employer-employee relationship and the employee produces a work that is his regular duty as an employee, then the copyright is owned by the employer. Right? Nasagot ko ba? That's basically the answer. If there's an employer-employee relationship, then it's owned by the employer. So if the teacher produces a video, a teaching material that is and that teacher is an employee of a particular school, and the making of the video is in pursuance of her or his regular duties as a teacher of that school, then copyright may be owned by the school. But it also depends if there is an IP policy that is in effect in that particular school.
Thank you for that answer, Attorney Jeremy. Because we have also instances here in DepEd when, of course, when I told you a while ago that some teachers are tasked to do learning materials, content, and we also have some who are tasked to do illustrations. For example, a person, government personnel here in DepEd is tasked to do an illustration, but he is not actually an illustrator. What are the copyright implications of such a situation?
Well, then again, there are different factors to consider. No, one is what I said earlier was the employer-employee relationship, but we also need to consider if it's a government work. Okay, so there are no in copyright and in these particular cases, there is no ready-made answer for those. We need to really go into like the contract of that particular person to create that particular work, or was it a commissioned work? Was it because of an employer-employee relationship? And it's also a work of the government, even if it's not part of his regular duty. So we have to consider all these factors, but I cannot, as of the moment, give you a categorical answer of whether or not that particular illustration by the employee of the government has created, if he owns the copyright of that particular work.
Thank you very much for that answer again, Attorney Jeremy. We really appreciate you giving us your time here in DepEd for thank you for answering our questions. Um, Maybe a last final question that we can also ask is related to the question earlier about when gathering content from the internet. When can you say, for example, if we cannot find the author of the content um, from the internet, when would you say would it be permissible to use it already? And when would be not when would that person not be violating copyright rules?
All right. It's always safe to err on the safe side, on the safer side. Uh, if we don't find the author, we call them orphaned works, no? Uh, and we don't have any rules yet as to that, as to orphaned works. But I'd like to share a particular framework whenever we examine, for example, whether we are infringing, or whenever we copy or we try to use the works of other persons. One, is it covered by copyright? Two, does it fall under any of the exceptions, which will be discussed tomorrow on fair use? And three, if it's not part of any of the exceptions on fair use, then maybe you have to seek the the author or creator, which in this case, sabi mo nga, hindi nakikita. So, kung hindi talaga makita, if there's talagang may diligent effort, probably you can use it. But ako personally, baka kasi bigla siyang lumitaw and then sabi niya, oh, that's mine. And so I usually just look for another work that is probably more or less the same as the as the work that I want to use. So just to err on the safe side.
Th- thank you, Attorney Jeremy. There are really a lot of questions. You can see really that our DepEd personnel is so interested in copyright. They would really like to learn so much about copyright, but unfortunately, I don't think we would have all the time to answer all of the questions that they have posted, uh, and maybe I would suggest that our bureaus probably should compile the questions. Maybe we can, with the help of also the legal team of the DepEd, maybe we can, and the cooperation of IPOFIL, maybe we can produce like a Q&A document for the benefit of our teachers in the field to answer all of the other questions that they pose. And also, I believe some of the questions also can be answered tomorrow by Director Cuyo. A lot of the other questions that they post can also be answered by Director Cuyo tomorrow. So again, thank you very much, Attorney Jeremy, for your time today, for providing so much information. And now we pass it on to our other moderator.
Good afternoon once again, Attorney Jeremy. This is John from BLR. We'll just have one question. This is common to all. I know that this is ever present in the live Q&A. This has something to do about the provision of these slides. Attorney Jeremy, can you provide us or can you share your slides to us?
Yes. It's a government work. So I can share it with you.
So that's good news to everybody who asked this question, and good news to all actually. This is most of our teachers and non-teaching personnel from the field are asking for a copy of this. So for the participants, just wait for the link or for the other platforms where we can post the presentation of Attorney Jeremy. So once again, for the questions raised for the live event Q&A, some questions can be answered tomorrow for another topic and the continuation of this webinar.
John,
Yes,
This is Jo Maribo.
Yusek, yes po.
I just wanted to emphasize that this is just part one of the webinar, and the presentation that will be shared is only partial because they are subject to some exceptions and limitations. And so if some participants are not coming back tomorrow, please be aware that the material you are holding on to and the information given in this seminar is just partial. Connected to this material are certain copyright exceptions and limitations which can complete the answer to some of the questions raised. For example, with respect to using materials from the internet, of course, the general rule is you ask permission from the author, but again, tomorrow we will learn that there can be some limitations and exceptions applicable to these activities of the teachers in creating content for their modules, and it will not be complete if we don't wait for the second part. No, so just an emphasis that this is only part one, and the exceptions and limitations, particularly with respect to education, to classroom use, will come tomorrow. Over to you, John. Thank you. And thank you very much to IPOFIL once again.
Thank you very much, Yusek Jo, for the clarification and for the preview tomorrow. So tomorrow will be another exciting and another portal for learning continuation for today's webinar. At this point, we would like to acknowledge the effort and the expertise of our speaker this afternoon. We will we will be awarding the certificate of appreciation to our speakers. The certificate reads, Republic of the Philippines Department of Education presents this certificate of appreciation to our first speaker, Desi C. Agamata, as a resource speaker in the webinar on copyright for the Department of Education personnel held on June 25 to 26, 2020 via Microsoft Teams, given this 25th of June 2020, signed Diosdado M. San Antonio, Undersecretary for Curriculum and Instruction, signed Attorney Josephine G. Maribuhok, Undersecretary for Legal Affairs.
Thank you so much.
The same certificate of appreciation is given to Attorney Jeremy C. Bayaras as resource speaker in the webinar on copyright for the Department of Education personnel held on June 25 and 26, 2020 via Microsoft Teams, given this 25th of June 2020, signed by USEC Diosdado M. San Antonio, Undersecretary for Curriculum and Instruction, and Attorney Josephine Maribuhok, Undersecretary for Legal Affairs. The takeaways this afternoon are aplenty, so our minds are well fed, and some may be overwhelming, but rest is just what we need to process everything. Tomorrow, we will continue with the webinar for the second day at exactly 1:30 in the afternoon. That's the same time. And we will be accepting participants at 12 o'clock in the afternoon. And we are also utilizing the MS Teams platform. We will be providing the link for tomorrow's live event through our regional LR supervisors and other personnel who can share these links to others. Again, we have uh, we have 2,500 attendees as of the moment, but we peaked to 3,500 participants uh, during the live event. Tomorrow, we are hoping that we will reach the same number and maybe even more who will be needing the topics on copyright exceptions and limitations. The whole BLR and Deped Legal Service would like to thank all the participants this afternoon and all the speakers um, and all our members of the Executive Committee of the Department of Education, to USEC Josephine Maribuhok and USEC Diosdado San Antonio, and also in the audience, ASEC Alma Rubitorio, who is now the officer in charge of the Bureau of Learning Resources, other directors of the central offices, and other officials of the Department of Education. So there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. That's the day one for the two-day webinar on copyright for the Department of Education. So we'll be providing another link for tomorrow. See you again tomorrow at exactly 1:30 in the afternoon. Good day, friends.